We're going to call to order the Lexington Planning Commission meeting October 27th. And first item to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Next, we'll move to approving the minutes from October 13th. Very nice minutes. Thank you very much, Kate.
I move to approve the minutes of October 13.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Moving along to the next item, citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. Anybody like to speak? Seeing nothing, I will close the citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda. We have one item of new business, which is the discussion of the Green Infrastructure Working Group final report. And yeah, who wants to start with that?
Me, I will,
All right.
and we have help. I need to throw out lifelines. He wants me down here on the. Actually, do I hate to have my back to you all. Just keep him down.
There you go.
Great. Okay, tonight I'd like to give a 10-minute introduction to the Green Infrastructure Report drafted by the Green Infrastructure Working Group. Some members are here. As it says in the subtitle, what we want to do is how can we move the conversation forward to achieve the well-stated goals? Here's Matt in the Green Infrastructure chapter. And I'll just note in the cover there, the goal of the Green Infrastructure chapter is to protect, preserve, and promote Lexington's natural ecosystems and green infrastructure as a cornerstone of sustainable development. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but that's the cornerstone.
I think you're here.
I would say that the goal for this evening is to start the conversation among the Planning Commission and for the Planning Commission to become familiar with the report and the recommended approach, with a particular focus on the collective impact model that can help Lexington to implement a longer-term strategy for green infrastructure. The other thing we'd like to do tonight, and it's in the agenda, is listen to comments from members of the working group and obtain feedback from commission members and discuss the next steps. I don't think this will be the only meeting that we have on this report. A quick note on, well, let me see if I can do this without, executive summary. The origin of this, the origins, at least the most immediate ones, go back to our decision as Planning Commission to recommend catalyst projects. And this was one of the catalyst projects, which was to reconvene the Green Infrastructure Working Group that helped us to write the chapter. And their charge was twofold. One, to provide feedback on drafting the bike ped plan, which you all have seen that, and the group gave very good comments. And then recommend to Council and Planning Commission how Lexington can achieve the goals and objectives and the strategies in the Green Infrastructure chapter. The working group members are here. We owe them a deep debt of gratitude. We are fortunate in Lexington to have their breadth of experience, talent, and interest in the topic. They gave their time and energy over the course of 9 meetings, all over Zoom. They also met in smaller group and organized around the initiatives in the report and contributed to the drafting of it. The recommendations and suggestions represent the collective wisdom of an engaged and thoughtful group that importantly knows Lexington well. the process. After the initial meetings where we got to know each other better and provide feedback to the bike ped plan, we started to organize our discussions around the 6 initiatives that you see at the bottom of the screen there. Health and recreation, urban green space, waterways, bicycle pedestrian network, land use development, and lastly, climate change resilience and sustainability. These different initiatives reflect the multidisciplinary nature of green infrastructure. And this lovely illustration on page 3 helps to illustrate graphically how some of these elements come together in the co-benefits. I keep imagining that one day when the next Taylor Street that gets upgraded could be looking more like that. We also gave time in the meeting for presentations by members, where we learned a lot about what their organizations are already doing. We learned about VMI and W&L's projects to reduce energy consumption, seek renewable energy sources, introduce LEED standards in buildings, and the use of best practices in stormwater management. We also learned about Boxerwood's innovative programs that support local sustainability initiatives, such as Core Works, where you can offset your carbon. You can earn carbon offsets. And we also had presentations by the Tree Board, about Brushy Hills and the Natural Bridge Soil and Water Conservation District. So that's just a small peek into the many groups that are doing something related to green infrastructure. Let me talk a little bit about the structure of the report by going to the table of contents. So after several iterations, we came up with really 3 parts of the report and annexes. The executive summary, which includes a definition of green infrastructure taken from the comprehensive plan and also provides highlights of the report. The initiatives, these are the core. This is the core part of the work. We worked around the strategies from the green infrastructure chapter and organized them around the 6 initiatives that form the basis of an integrated approach. Within each initiative, there's a summary of its value statement and a description of it, recommendations, and in some cases, more detailed matrices, and with suggested actions and potential partners. This is an important point, potential partners. We didn't say these are the partners. And then part 3, making it happen, notes that who is already involved in green infrastructure activities, provides an explanation of the collective impact model and potential funding opportunities. A note that I mentioned last time, this report is not a statutory document. It's not like the comprehensive plan that's required by legislation. It's a roadmap to continue the conversation and develop a game plan to implement the chapter using the resources we have within the city. It's a framework. Think about it as a framework, a strategy, and a model for moving forward and keeping green infrastructure on the front burner in a more connected way among different players. Within the 6 initiatives, recommendations and actions range from low-hanging fruit to longer-term projects. We also acknowledge that these recommendations and potential partnerships are a starting point for continuing the discussion. Everybody stay with me. Oh, this is, how do I get, I'll get there. Sorry. Trying to get to page 27. Partnerships. The green infrastructure chapter, when you look closely at the strategies there's a highly placed, partnerships are highly valued. And what we're suggesting in this report is how that can happen. And the other point to make is green infrastructure is not entirely new topic in Lexington. Past city council initiatives demonstrates how council and Lexington residents value our natural resources and open spaces. Examples include funding the city arborist, creating the tree board, the tree canopy study, restoration of Woods Creek and the trail, stormwater retention projects, and recycling programs. So this is not a new topic for us. We've done it before. The collective impact model. So based on the recommendations of the working group, and including those who have experience in using it, this is really the core of what I would call the institutional approach to making this happen. And rather than creating a new institution, what the collective impact model does is bring together existing organizations. According to the Virginia Environment Endowment, its collective impact is becoming the preferred adaptive management technique for addressing complex sustainability projects. Because as you can see when you read the report, a lot of this is connected. There are key elements of a collective impact model. These include a coalition of partners whose efforts are organized around a common agenda, shared measurement systems, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, all of that facilitated by a backbone organization. And guess what? We already have it in Lexington, Rockbridge. We have 3 running now. The Rockbridge Waste Reduction Roundtable by Boxerwood, Carillion, Live Healthy Rockbridge. And we have a representative here that we're very fortunate to have, and then Rockbridge Outdoors. To illustrate how these work, you'll see on page 28, and I know we have a description of Live Healthy Rockbridge and Rockbridge Outdoors and how they're organized. So I think that can inform the discussion. What are the advantages of this? We think the collective impact model is a way to do this in the most economical way and to accomplish the strategies in the green infrastructure chapter. Importantly, the model is favored by funders and can help raise and leverage outside funding at a time when the city will be facing fiscal challenges, as we hear in the council debates over upcoming capital improvement programs. And there's flexibility, and really it's a low budget startup that taps the talent of our community and leverages staff time by linking them to a wider network. So in closing, what's the ask? What's the ask for the commission and the city council? I would say it's to explore and validate how the collective impact model can become a viable approach for accomplishing many of the green infrastructure initiatives outlined in the comprehensive plan, and participate and support the development of that collective impact model. Forget that. So what are our next steps? Based on the feedback from the commission and comments that we received tonight, we can make changes to the draft report. I also anticipate, given how we did the comprehensive plan, that we'll need either 1 or 2 more meetings to go into more detail and maybe systematically go through the initiatives rather than helter-skelter tonight. Schedule a work session with City Council, which Arnie noted might happen early next year. So we have some time to work on this. Develop a consensus on who can be the backbone organization or organizations, and then support them in reaching out to other organizations noted in this report to gauge their interest in participating, and then support them in a funding grant for funding grants. So I'll leave it at that. I left this picture up here of Woods Creek, thanks to Holly. And just to remind everyone the history of that, it was done in 2002, 2004. And I think it exemplifies how the city of Lexington residents, partners, Washington Lee, VMI can work together to improve our green infrastructure network. And that was a significant initiative that the impact still resonates today. Thank you. I can take questions, or I think what might even be better is to open up the public comment. I think people will complement and enhance what I've introduced tonight.
Thank you very much, John. Yes. Before we have, do you have specific questions for John?
Yeah. Thank you. This is a tremendous amount of work. So thank you to you and all your partners. And it's a great, great document. And I want to memorialize it in some way and turn it into more of an action item that will not just be shelved away. What, and this may also be a question for Arnie. Ultimately, are we going to take a vote to approve these minutes, to include these minutes, or do we need to actually incorporate them and take a more substantial action? In which case, what would you suggest to make sure that these don't just disappear?
Arnie, you want to go first?
I think ultimately for implementation, it's going to be up to the will of council on how they want to move forward with this. And it's up to you at this point, or as you're working through this, to see what your recommendation is going to be. If you want to endorse it, if you want to endorse it with conditions or changes, or how you want to make a recommendation. But I expect what they ask for you is to make a recommendation on this so that it can be taken to council.
So we take this to council, we approve this, it goes to council, but then do we next agree on some action that needs to be taken based in response to this, or do we make a recommendation for action, or how does that work?
It's a little bit difficult in that planning commission in your not intent section, but your enabling section of the codes, and that's not quite the right word either. So, but what you're tasked to do are a couple of things. One is to compose and draft the comprehensive plan. The other is to maintain the comprehensive plan. And to me, that means more of upkeeping the plan and not necessarily implementing it. So what I'm trying to get at is implementation is really not the function of the planning commission. So it's up to what council wants to do once they receive this particular recommendation and report on what actions would they want to take to potentially implement some sections. They could come back. There are a couple of different options. They could ask for this to be sort of shortened and prioritized. They could ask for which actions are easiest to accomplish in a short period of time. So it's up to council once it's proposed or provided to them to see what their reaction is.
So it sounds like one action we could take would be to get feedback, but then select something and try and incorporate that, make a motion to incorporate that into the comprehensive plan and move it forward that way to make it part of the comprehensive plan. Or
A lot of these items are already in the comprehensive plan, except for the collective impact model. And I think that's just a tool or a mechanism. So say council wants to go forward with one particular item and says, yeah, let's use the collective impact model after they are educated a little bit more on what that means and how it can potentially function. And then they could potentially move forward that way.
what I'm saying is that change the comprehensive plan, the work, even though a lot of this is already in the comprehensive plan, this does a really nice job of tying it together, and maybe we could add some statement to the comprehensive plan that expands maybe the green infrastructure part to point this out. I don't know if that's even legal, but
it's a living document. It can be changed with public hearing. So you can certainly make that recommendation if you see something in this report that's above and beyond what's already in the comprehensive plan, and you think that it's needed to be amended to incorporate that, that can certainly be a recommendation. You have wide latitude right now on how you handle this report and what kind of recommendations you want to make to council.
A couple of,
Oh, sorry.
can I just
Sure.
respond to that, Leslie? I think about this a little bit like the bicycle pedestrian plan. We reviewed the recommendations of the consultant, we commented on it and went forward to council. And council is the one who accepted it. And in a way, it wasn't, it's not, again, it's not a statutory document. It's like a working document. So that's one thing. The second point is, and Pat and I have made it very clear to the working group that really the Planning Commission's work was to launch this as a catalyst initiative. and kind of introduce, as Blake said, maybe this is a new model to take a chapter in the comp plan and actually move it forward rather than it sitting on a shelf. But once it leaves us, once we say, yes, we think this document captures what needs to be done, and it goes to council, it's really out of our competency. We've done our job in a way as planning commission. We're not meant to implement this. This is really council's decision to do that. The priority for me, and that's what I mentioned in the ask, and based on what our colleagues are saying, is that I don't think we need to think about this like, okay, we like these projects, these are important, we can do that. But probably the most important thing is to validate this idea of the collective impact model and say, yes, this is a way that this can move forward. And once we do that and we identify an organization, they'll be the ones that begin to organize some of the strategies in here and develop priorities. And I think our colleagues tonight can explain more how that happens with the existing collective impact models we have. So I think would be my response on that. Yes, sorry, Leslie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think realistically, one way that council will incorporate this, as will we, is through city council strategic plan. Some of these our strategic plan is a short-term plan. It's 3 to 5 years. And I think by presenting this plan, it gives council it informs the community and council what needs to be done in the community and council. And typically when we do the strategic plan, we get many groups together to prioritize, to pick out some that are priorities and get them in the strategic plan so that we are focusing on them. But just by having this document and all of us reading it and reading it, reviewing it annually or at some frequency, I mean, you get into things like review city codes to ensure adequate promotion and protection of green infrastructure. By having read this and keeping it in our mind, I think that whenever we take any action, you kind of come back to it and implement it, not just from a city council standpoint, but from our standpoint as well. But I do think we need to have some progress on it and some action, and then carrying out that maybe through these groups.
I think that some of the actions in here can be, it raises the awareness, and these can be incorporated, just as you're saying, like when we do our annual zoning review, we have a discussion among commission and with Arnie and say, okay, we'd like to put this on the list this year. The tree board has its work ongoing. So different parties can pick this work up. And it's not only the city partners, it's other partners that are actually already doing a lot. And what we want to do through this model is try to connect those initiatives and get a collective impact.
I'm thinking back towards, I'm thinking back towards some of the discussion we just had on the PDMUs, and that, which I think was a really good discussion, but then when we talk about environmental impact, that's one of the things we need to establish or make sure that it's been addressed. We can refer to the comprehensive plan, but we can't really officially refer to this document. Although this document does do a good job of putting together a lot of dots that are in the comprehensive plan. And maybe that's really what its superpower is that it gives a really nice map. But I just want to make sure, I would like to be able to refer to this if we do have, for example, a PDMU coming forward, and unless it's part of something official, that I don't know if we can.
I like to say that, yes, you can. If you have something out on East Nelson Street and it's one of the properties that has something to do with the recommendations in the Route 60 corridor plan, you can refer to that plan and say, hey, this parcel was supposed to have a back entrance. And if there's something that's relevant in the green infrastructure chapter in this green infrastructure report, you can always refer to all of those things when making those decisions.
I mean, going back to following up on that, the basis of the extra work in here are the strategies in the green infrastructure chapter. And, you know, in the beginning, people had different ideas and we wrestled around with what is green infrastructure. And then finally we came back and said, no, it really, we're working with what we have and how do we make it happen? And that's really the emphasis.
Oh, I know the planning commission can have some discussion, but let's open up public comment for anybody that feels moved to speak or add feedback. I just want to also, on behalf of planning commission, thank the members of the Green Infrastructure Working Group that are here and those that aren't here for diligently working over the past several year or so. It's a lot of work and a lot of very impressive. Great, thank you. And just speak your name into the microphone and your address. Thank you.
Holly Osby, 16 Edmonds Ave here in Lexington. So I have been part of the working group, and my profession, I work at the hospital. I lead a coalition that utilizes the collective impact model. And so it's something that I'm very familiar with. And so I wanted to share a couple of things about that. To your point, you were talking about connecting the dots with various things that are going on. And that is the whole point of collective impact, is that you have multiple things happening around the community. Some of it is specifically related to the city and the city's responsibilities to do. And I'm thinking like sidewalks and those types of things that obviously would have to be done by the city. But there are other entities within the city that are also doing things or have an impact on the overall green infrastructure of our community. And so if we work together, we can connect the dots. It helps us prioritize by knowing what other people are doing, so we can best utilize resources when there's momentum on a particular project or a particular issue. But it also helps us know, well, if somebody's doing this, then maybe, you know, if Carillion or VMI or WNL is doing some sort of thing, then maybe the city doesn't need to focus on that in the strategic plan if it's already happening somewhere else. So you can focus your energies on other things. So it's very similar to how you would think of any old coalition, right? It's building communication and talking with folks. But the difference with collective impact is that there's a framework to it. It is a framework. And so it allows a lot of flexibility, so that when you have different, I'm going to use the word culture, in the different ways that the city does business, as opposed to the way that the hospital does business or the way that one of the schools does business, it allows for flexibility so that we don't have to all accommodate one style of doing something. But it allows us to continue to work together within that. It does need a backbone entity. It does need a point person whose job it is to stay in touch with people and to facilitate communication. And that person isn't necessarily doing all of the work. They're just kind of keeping track of who's doing what and making sure that everybody has the ability to know what's going on with that. So I think when we're talking about something like this, it's really important to recognize that if we work together, we will have a lot more resources and make a much bigger impact than if we just rely on one entity to try to make it happen. And Leslie, you had said something about keeping things in the front of mind. This is a way of doing that, just by those regular touches. Even if you're not necessarily doing anything in this quarter or, you know, whatever, it still keeps it in your mind so that the next issue that comes up, it's there. You're like, oh yeah, the green infrastructure working group was doing this thing. And so it might be related to that. It helps you see places where there's room for collaboration, where you wouldn't necessarily think of it otherwise, because it's already put out there.
Can I ask you a question, Holly?
Yeah,
So,
please.
and I know it's in the report, it talked about it briefly, having a point person. So would you have a collective impact group for topic areas? Or are you talking about having one overall for the whole implementation?
There's flexibility there.
Okay.
So the way I envision it, which is not necessarily the way that it has to end up being, is I envision it as like one green infrastructure group, whatever you want to call it. And there will be various committees from time to time on particular topics. Kind of the way that we have broken out this report with the 6 different areas that we had in there. I could envision a committee for each one of those that would focus, and some would be more active at times than others, depending on what we're able to focus on and what we have resources to address. So that's how I envision it, but there's flexibility in there and how that could come to play. And that's something that once that group comes together, they can decide. So it wouldn't be it's not all on the city to make those decisions. It's a shared decision, and it does not give the power over the city. Like, it doesn't give other organizations the ability to say, City of Lexington, you have to do this. Like, that's not how it works. It's just communicating and the city saying, we're willing to take this on because this fits in with what's going on. And that's where city council comes in and says, yes, we're going to allocate these resources for whatever projects are appropriate at this time.
Thanks.
So is this the kind of, I'm just thinking about the person who is going to pull all the pieces together, get all the interests everybody who might be interested in this together. I'm seeing that in some ways it wants to be local or centered in this common notion of government, of the city government. Is that the kind of job the coordinator would be, like a city manager who can just we have the groups meeting all the time, but the city manager can see a project coming in and can touch on difference? Or do you just want that's totally set? Does it need to be totally separate from government in that sense?
It doesn't need to be, but it certainly could be. The way I have been thinking of it, and again, these are my opinions that are not the end be all of how it has to be, but I kind of see it as somebody who would be functioning as extra staff for Arnie to help keep track of what's going on. It does not need to be a city employee. And we've talked about one of the local nonprofits being the backbone entity and housing that coordinator person. So it could be somebody with those credentials. That would certainly not be a bad thing at all, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think it would be somebody who just has really good coordination skills and is able to pull people together and work well with a lot of different types of people and different organizations, and somebody who could do all of that and then put it together in a nice, clean way and help Arnie know what else is going on, and you guys know what else is going on to help make those recommendations to the city council.
I think that's a very doable model. I think you're better off not to rely on the city to lead it, but have a liaison, one of the members either be a council member or a staff person. Then I think that's a very doable model. Because reading through all this, I don't think anybody's going to I couldn't find anything that was controversial or people would take issue with any of the goals or the projects within. They look great. It's that implementation. And so really being effective, I think you can have a backbone organization, but definitely have city liaison. It'll be more successful overall for certain projects. Again, get those on city council strategic plan radar on the short term for things that are very city focused. But like you said, a lot of these, some of them don't even include the city and
Yeah,
but for those that are, push those up to get on
yeah,
the city council
absolutely.
radar.
There would need to be a liaison with the
right.
city, obviously, because we're talking about how to implement the city's comprehensive plan. And so there has to be somebody from the city to help with that. But there's so much more going on that can help support that.
Mhm.
And that's the point of this, is to help provide that support and momentum to help keep moving things forward. Questions?
Thanks, Holly.
Okay.
Public comment still open?
Charles Alligood, 506 Cavalry Road. Can't say enough good about this report. I've read it as well. And I think back when we were talking about the comprehensive plan at the beginnings of the comprehensive plan, and how this green infrastructure group got started. It was kind of a subset of working on the comprehensive plan. And a group was formed to do it. One of the people who's not here today, I want to recognize, is Jamie Gooden, former chair here of the Planning Commission, and along with John and the people that met in that room that first day. I happened to be sitting in on that. This is prior to, but at the time of the development of the comprehensive plan, just has so many great ideas. They're all creative thinkers. And what a blessing it is for Lexington to have these people have such a keen interest and represent that keen interest that I think is widespread in the city for this, the ideas put forward that constitute this green infrastructure group. We always like to have acronyms and whatnot. So just think green infrastructure group, it's a gig, right? So we can figure out how to make that work, maybe as a way to make it go further in just discussion. The potential that I observed with that first group of people sharing their thoughts and talking about the green side of the comprehensive plan was very impressive. And it was a powerful meeting. And it has developed into this. So after the comprehensive plan was established and approved, there was a consensus that there needed to be a continuation of the thinking that occurred with that first group. So it was breaking ground. And this particular result is wonderful. And to have this group representing this community, I would suspect if we poll the community that the ranking of being concerned about the green side of Lexington would rank up there at the top, no doubt about it, in my opinion. And this group represents that. One of the things that was happening, not in our town, but in the town of Blacksburg at the time of our comprehensive plan, was the town of Blacksburg addressed the tree canopy issue, and they did a planting of several thousands of trees. And attempting to address, when you plant a tree, you're not planting it for today, you're planting it for the next generation or two and beyond. And so they did that. And one of the things that makes Lexington look good to the eye when new people come into town, and people who live here as well, is the trees. And so the fact that we have good trees, we need to maintain them. Anytime a tree is dug up, ought to be replaced. Just listening to Ms. Beazle back here talking about a project where trees were dug up for a public works project. They need to be replaced as well with the plan and maybe add to that. You go along Woods Creek Trail, what stands out? The water and the trees. That's what makes that place really good. The fact that the comprehensive plan produced the catalyst projects, of which this now is a subset of sorts of the catalyst projects, was really great. That's the actionable side of what can happen with comprehensive plans. So Ms. Osby mentioned that we need to have, and Mr. Driscoll, the actionable side for this as well. And I agree, City Council is going to be very instrumental in doing that, but we need a liaison. And I agree that we need to have a liaison to point out to the city to keep reminding us of the things that would be good to do that would improve our city culturally as well as from the green side. The evidence that there is this great interest is here. The document, I agree with Mr. Tuckler, is a great document and should be memorialized. And this is a great start. And I want to lend my support as much as I can, both here and at City Council, to make this happen, make it a real event. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Come on up, Arthur.
Arthur Barsenstein, do you need my address?
Yes, please.
614 Stonewall Street.
Thank you.
Lexington is, of course, greatly appreciated for its historic character. And I think the green infrastructure not only is relevant to the recreation and the environment and health, but also to Lexington's, historic identity. And I think that there's a very strong preservation community here, and I think they would also be have a role and interest in this. And the only other thing I was going to say is that many cities have parks departments, and I've always been sort of concerned that Lexington has really had no one to on the staff to really be concerned with the city's open spaces. And so, I think it is something that really should be, considered as Lexington continues to grow and become a more sort of well-rounded city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merrill to South Randolph. We're very encouraged to hear the reaction. I mean, that's what we're sitting here. I don't want to give a speech as to, we all think it's great what's in here, and we need to get you need to read up on it. I'm sure you haven't assimilated all of it yet, but the collective impact model can take this thing off like a rocket. This town likes to pride itself on being special and meritorious, and we have such intellectual capacity here. We have such a small population. We could really have big impacts in the 1, 2, 3, and 4 year range. This could transform once again our historic nature, our crossroads, all the things that make Lexington special. This is a new framework that supports all of those other things. So we're just very excited to hear that maybe it'll be the Parks Department in 5 years or 4 years or whatever it takes to get that real. County doesn't have a parks and recreation group either, so you're not alone. But obviously, there are a lot of city functions that this will work into in this collective impact model. So it's going to enrich all parts because we've got lots of qualified volunteers, but the backbone entity is the thing that'll make this work. And so that's why we're having these really creative conversations between Boxerwood, between RAC, which is now called Rock On, by the way. We are Rockbridge Conservation is our trading name now. And so if you'd like to come up with a better acronym, maybe Mr. Elliott will have it, but Rock On has been proposed. But RAC is a thing of the past. And there are others, and it'll float. That center of attention point, that center point will float between organizations as the issues come and go, but it'll have a consistent person that will make this thing go. So I'm very encouraged to hear your reactions tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
So Lee, can I ask you a question? I'm still getting stuck. Who do you think that one person should be who makes sure this goes? You said
The
the
best
center-
person that we can find who's already resident here and knows the community well and works with these various groups. And there are several people that may be interested in doing that. And if the funding is around, we need to house this person. Maybe it's a halftime position. It may be staffed out of somebody who's already involved in one of these groups. It's already a halftime person. So, I mean, that's the best we can find is my short answer.
I have a question for anybody that is an expert on collective impact, but is there this model? I see there's a hyperlink that I can't open up on paper, but are there bylaws that come with this, or does each collective impact kind of generate their own bylaws?
I would think that there are templates for it that each one would undertake to make personal to the situation, but
Mhm.
I don't know. Holly's more expert on that than I am.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so there don't necessarily have to be bylaws. I would recommend doing it just because it's a best practice. But no, it's not set out as far as what it has to look like. So for example, Live Healthy Rockbridge, the coalition that I lead, does not have bylaws at all. And it functions fine because it's such a long-standing coalition and there's already such culture built into it that there are expectations and norms built in. But I would recommend doing some loose bylaws in there, but it doesn't need to be super formal. And in fact, it shouldn't be so formalized that it doesn't allow for flexibility. To Lee's point, he had talked about at various times, different organizations or groups would be more of the focus of what's going on. And you want to make sure you maintain that flexibility to be able to shift and adapt depending on what city council is willing to focus on and what other community partners are willing and able to focus on at any given time.
So when we're talking about collective impact, you're saying that in your organization in which you actually apply this collective impact model, it is part of an organization that could, if it wanted, have bylaws.
Sure.
But if we want to apply this citywide extends beyond your organization, that is just kind of a general template for the community, you would recommend that we do have bylaws, which means that, and all of a sudden you're making a super organization in which everything else, is that correct? I'm just trying to get my head around this.
So it doesn't have to be its own organization. That's why you have a backbone organization to do it. This is more of a general agreement among partners. And so perhaps bylaws aren't the right word for it, but I would recommend as a new entity, as a new coalition, that at the beginning of that, the partners come together and decide how they want it structured. And so because there's no history there to build upon.
Would that kind of be the shared measurement system for the collective impact?
So that would be part of like the deliverables that come out of it. You want to decide how you're going to measure your progress. And measuring progress is one of the harder things to do. At least that's how I feel about it in my world, but others may feel differently. But the partners decide together how they're going to measure that progress. And so I use my Live Healthy Rockbridge, my coalition, as an example. It does not have to be that way. There are other organizations that function in a slightly different way. Rockbridge Outdoors, which is another local coalition that utilizes the collective impact model. They have a more formalized structure, and it works well for them. And again, it's because when they started, they built that together because it was a new organization. Live Healthy Rockbridge evolved over time from a very informal get together of like who's doing what in the community to an actual formal coalition that now develops a strategic plan for the community based on the community health assessments. And so we as a coalition decide how we're going to measure our progress and say, yes, we've accomplished what we want to accomplish, or no, we haven't, or we kind of have a little bit. And so that'll be decided among the group. And that will vary depending on what kind of projects you're trying to tackle at any given time.
Great. Thank you, Holly. Any more public comment?
With regard to this, maybe this is a discussion. I'm just trying to moving this forward. Do we need to also move forward some ideas about structure or not structure, or how we? Because I think it's a great idea.
Well, let's we'll have a discussion in just a sec. But are there any more members present that would like to speak before we close that second? Come on up.
Elise Sheffield, Boxerwood, home address 1 South River Road, Buena Vista, Virginia. So I'm outside your jurisdiction. I also, through my organization, I'm part of a collective impact model. It's probably the most modest scale one, but just as you're trying to get that sense of what does this model look like, I thought maybe you would like to hear about that one as well. So our collective impact model is the Rockbridge Waste Reduction Roundtable. And it started a couple of years ago. Boxerwood is the backbone organization. Our mission, as many of you know, is way bigger than waste reduction, but we have, think of it as a Venn diagram. We have a little piece of working with schools and waste reduction, and there are other organizations locally working as a part of their mission or their whole mission on, recycling or waste reduction. And we were beginning to step on each other's toes, right? Because everybody was doing their own thing. So the collective impact model attempts to organize that. And so we don't have any bylaws, and as yet, we don't even have any metrics. But the main idea is just keep thinking of that Venn diagram. Where are organizations overlapping? And in that sweet spot, what can we all say, yeah, this is all suits something for different reasons. And so I'm the facilitator of that. Boxford happens to have funding for me to do that, actually through some funding from a different source specific for this. And the entity, Rockbridge Waste Reduction Roundtable, does no actions. All the work is happening in the organizations. It is a non-acting information networking that has a bit of accountability when we meet now every other month. And we're an information disseminator. So we have a mailing list to the city, to the county, to other entities. And some of those people aren't there, but they get the minutes, so they can kind of track what's going on. And that is the model of working on a common interest, but everybody bringing their own strength to the table.
So when you said accountability, you have accountability to each other. The organizations have committed to doing this. And so as making that commitment and accepting this responsibility, everybody knows that. And so that is the accountability that it keeps it moving forward.
And ultimately, we would have metrics for accountability. Like this year, our goal would be to increase recycling by X at community events. The other piece that I wanted to say was, what was it? Came? It went. Never mind. I think part of what's going to be. I think I've said enough. Unless you have another question?
No, thank you for that. That was very helpful. Thank you, Elise. All right, winding down public comment, but any last? Oh, you remembered. You remembered. Come on back up. We didn't close your session.
That was just a pause. The cool thing that I've noticed, even in this very small scale, is a synergy that happens, that when entities start talking with one another, we realize new opportunities. And that bring new things forth. And that's probably what this roundtable is, this particular one is doing best. New things that wouldn't have happened by any one entity, but together it's making something move. And I imagine that would also be true with the green infrastructure at a much more formal scale. So.
Excellent. All right, going once, going twice on public comment. All right, thank you very much. We're going to close public comment and move to commission discussion. However, if we have questions, I'm okay with asking questions if we have of you all, but so I can probably guess that the five of us up here are sort of like what we see, and we're also very appreciative of the report. So now it just, the discussion lies in next steps, implementation, how we can take this and move it forward if possible.
The moving forward is what I want to think about so that we move forward effectively, as opposed to it's just passed on. I just want it to be, maybe if there's some way we can move this forward as a resource for all future considerations of development. I don't know. I don't know how to do it, but I just want to move it forward in a way that it doesn't just be collecting dust on the back, which I don't think it will in the next year or 2 or 3 years. But I could see after this population moves on that it may not be as front burner, and therefore not as, if not told you have to refer to it or you can refer to it, it won't be referred to.
I agree. I think that's a good point. And I think the more, I was going to say structure, but that's not the right word, but the more meat we can give to how you put this together will be helpful to council. Looking at page 29, it says the working group recommends that city council adopt a collective impact model for realizing a greater number of green infrastructure goals. And then we suggest that the city support a multi-year grant to hire a CI coordinator. I like the idea. I would hate to see things kind of come to a halt because the city doesn't have funds for that person. I like the idea of an outside organization, maybe being having a main backbone person, but definitely have a city involvement through, like we talked about, through a liaison. I think maybe if we can flesh out some of that, I think it will be received a little better and acted upon more quickly. But that's going to take discussion among, the green infrastructure group, not just us, to see how we can do that.
Yeah, obviously funding is important. And I'm not in the world of seeking grant opportunities, knowing what's out there. And I wouldn't expect city staff to be the grant, people going out seeking grant opportunities. But I guess what I would hope to see is that city council, whenever they get this report from, passed from us, or a recommendation from us, or from any public that decides to go to a city council meeting to talk about this, is the city council and just the city of Lexington in general knows that this is important thing that our city and our that the public wants and values, and that this should be sort of a it should be a priority and something to consider and moving forward with future, with the strategic plan. And it's not just going to be like, oh, there's that one small subset of, environmentally conscious people that are, okay, good. But that this is, if we prioritize this and the, the public makes it known, that would be my hope for this.
I mean, I think that a lot of what we're saying is will come out before we hand this document over when we have this work session with the city council, in which we have it as the agenda to discuss this. Did we talk about that? Wasn't that mentioned having a work session with, and
Probably in January.
and then
The request to, if I'm loosely remembering this correctly, to have a work session before the end of the year, before we got into grant season. But work sessions aren't available between now and the end of the year. So I believe it was the mayor who said something at the end of the last city council meeting that your annual joint meeting, first part of the year, would be a good time to bring this up and potentially other issues also. So it'll probably be in the first part of the year where there will be a joint meeting.
So what would you recommend, that we just not turn this over until we hand this over with some conviction as to what we are intending, what we are hoping and expecting with handing this over? So maybe we not just push this on yet, but time it. I don't know. What do you think?
I would, guess I
I'm-
prefer to
I'm-
use
you know,
January, a
I'm
realistic
listening
goal.
'cause-
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been
Mhm.
listening because I've
Seems
So,
like it would be.
a couple points. We talked about this in our last working group meeting. The members are committed to supporting this to get it over the line. And that based on the feedback today and the reception, we kind of have we're affirming an approach, that we've agreeing on an approach. So I think where more work can happen between now and say another meeting that we have, or find one, in December or November, where we can tighten up the idea on how to implement it. And then also note potential funders or funding sources for grants in this. And then maybe be more specific on who could be the outside organization or coalition of organizations. It could be the backbone.
Mhm.
So I think that's really the most critical bit to work on. And I think if we have a better feeling of that, then when we go and have a work session with council, we have something more definitive to give. So
It's like making sure that our instructions, they can understand someone who we're giving this toy to, they can understand the instructions on how to use the toy. And that's what you're saying. Let's make clear that we pretty carefully articulate how this can be used. And these are the buttons you need to push to make this happen. Is that what you're saying, Mark?
yes, and also importantly, and based on the expertise we have in the working group, we understand that there are grant funds. I mean, this is a preferred model by funders to use, because from a funder's point of view, you're not saying, I want to create a new 501c3 to do something. You're not creating an institution that you have to feed. You're building off the assets that you have in your community. So I think that's the work that we can do a little bit more on now in terms of looking out for potential sources. Feedback I've had is, council is always a little hesitant to fund a new position. So I think, Leslie, you're absolutely correct that the way to look at this is how do we support an organization or organizations to go and get the funding to be the backbone? If the city is part of it and endorses the approach and the report, then that gives the grant funding a lot more strength, the application. So I recommend maybe what I would suggest is we can organize the 10th meeting of the working group. You're all up to it. And pick up on some of the points we've made today and then come back to commission with maybe some more specific language on that.
Yeah, it was helpful for me to hear you all. You know, with the Venn diagram model was very helpful
Very
for me to
helpful, yeah.
visualize sort of, collective impact. And it's, I don't know, I haven't heard that language, but I guess maybe I'm not as much of a community organizer as I thought, but no, I think that model works, and selling it to the community would make sense. And I think under the framework that, yeah, we're not expecting the city to just say, okay, well, here's money for this thing, but to have this, as you said, the city's endorsement that this is a priority and this is what the city values, so that it does give more legs to organizations to go seek funding and know that they have the community, they'll have the city's, the city will back them up with that.
And then again, that it came up in the discussion, maybe Leslie raised it too, is that, and along with Holly, is that, yes, the city plays a role through its liaison person, which may very much be a council person, just as the council members sit on different organizations now. So,
Can I offer a suggestion to you? It appears that there's willingness to do some refinement to this particular document. You have one meeting in November and you have one meeting in December. And we're certainly can put a placeholder on the first meeting in November for this and this is the if it can be done in the next week, because our packet will have to go out on next Friday. And if not, then we put it onto the December agenda for your December meeting to have another discussion with this, if that's the will of the planning commission.
I don't know if we can get it together in a week. We could try. So I can poll the group and try to organize a meeting by then, but it also takes a little while to do some of the research and the write-up. So we can have the meeting, but the bigger work is doing the background.
December seems more realistic.
More realistic.
Just to make you aware of the two options, because our presumption is the joint meeting with council will be early, middle part of January.
Then, yeah, okay, well, let's go for.
You
the
may still
December
have
one.
one meeting available first part of January potentially, but certainly November and December, you have one each.
And do you expect there's gonna be room in November, in December? In terms of. the
I
agenda?
suspect so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good plan. Looking forward to it. And like, I feel, I mean, this document's it's very exhaustive and very thorough. I was, all the matrices and I mean, you all have already put so much effort and thought into it. So it's, I wouldn't consider this like a rough draft. This is a pretty final copy, but it's mostly just putting that final bow on it to that, so it could be like an easily readable, digestible document that can be, looked at and for, for council, for other people in the community.
If I could say one more thing, is I see, as we were talking, I was looking at this document, certainly it was connecting a lot of dots, but I also saw it as, a nice incentive. If somebody comes into the project, that they can say, this is where it fits in perfectly, because this tells me, if I'm interested, just by looking at this, where I can fit into so many aspects of the comprehensive plan. If I'm just paying attention to when I'm developing to the environment. So this is a very useful document for, I think, for any kind of developer.
Can I ask an in the weeds question? Since today is the city's Arbor Day, we celebrated it today. And this is probably a question for Betty. So one of the items was to expand protection to private trees by adding the designations memorial, heritage, specimen, and street trees to the tree ordinance. What's that mean?
It allows us to you mind? I'm sorry. Thank you.
We do have enabling legislation that allows those categories as special protected trees. And that's one thing that the tree board will be looking at as we go forward.
It just, somebody could not cut it down or remove it, is that?
It would be a protection that these of course would apply to trees on private property.
Mhm.
Could apply to trees on private or public property, and it would add another level of protection. And in some cases, it could go with the land, as they say, be part of the deed or something that protects a tree ongoing as owners change.
Thank you. I just wasn't sure what it meant.
Great. Any last words before we close this item of new business?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you to the working group. You can see from the comments and the help today, what we have a real brain trust that we can draw on for this stuff.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to item 6, other business, zoning and planning report.
Staff contacted the Farmers Co-op about the non-compliant exterior lighting that they had installed, and they have contacted an electrician and hopefully can make changes soon. The Commissioner of Revenue found a food truck that was scheduled for an event at the Farmers Co-op, and luckily we were able to contact the vendor, coordinated with the health department, and we're able to issue a mobile restaurant license in time for the event. We received our first building code appeal, and we are working on a staff report currently for that appeal. And this will be the first appeal heard by the joint Lexington Buena Vista Board of Code Appeals, the LBBCA, sorry, long acronym. So that's the first, this is something that we instituted or put together a couple of years ago in the eventuality of having an appeal to a building code item. And again, this in the 2 or 3 years since it's been constructed, this will be the first time an appeal goes to that board. And we are sharing folks from BV and Lexington on that board. Scott Dameron and I registered for a November 16th bicycles and pedestrians class. It's held by the UVA Transportation Training Academy. And the objective is to equip participants with information on designing safer, more comfortable, accessible communities. There's a whole lot more to that I didn't write down about bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and that type of information. Arthur Bartenstein stopped by the office today, and he had a plan laid out for a piece of property that shows an accessory dwelling unit. So it's going to be a good example for when we get into that conversation. How big can they be? Where can they fit on the property? So, and he was gracious enough to share that. So we'll have that as part of our accessory dwelling unit conversation once that gets kicked off.
When do we think that's getting kicked off?
If I remember correctly, the first meeting in December was when we had committed, but we'll have to go back and check.
What about the next meeting in November?
It's possible also, but for some reason I have December stuck in my head
Yeah.
for that discussion. I'm not sure why at the moment, but it'll be on your agenda soon. And again, the first meeting will probably be just sort of a background information. We have a couple of
November or December?
Small cells.
Yeah, small cells.
we're happy to put both on if you like it. It's up to you.
Is there a sense that we need to get cracking on this accessory dwelling right now?
Arthur's going to say yes, because he has a project, and a couple of people do have projects, but I don't think the 1 month start date is going to make that much of a.
Especially because we're having big month breaks.
But we could easily, since we already have a couple of resource documents in code language, we could provide those to you in your next packet for the November meeting. And if we get to it, we get to it and have a discussion. And if we don't, then we just push it off and you have a little bit more time to read some of those background documents.
Honestly, with those month gap between meetings, I think in some ways it's better to start in January where you don't have to, from one meeting to the next, you don't have to try to recall everything. It's a little fresher.
That's up to you on how you want to go forward with the accessory dwelling units. I'm hearing maybe start in January.
Well, we've already put something on our plate for December with the green infrastructure. So I don't know if we have any other zoning applications then or big master plan discussions or anything like that. So
Not that I'm aware of as of this time.
I think we could probably fit green infrastructure in the beginning of accessory dwelling in December, maybe just a preamble to accessory dwellings. Yeah.
We'll keep it in December then if everybody's
But
okay with
I'm
that.
also thinking maybe even, I hate to say it, maybe pushing it to January, because that's gonna be the point at which we're gonna have new members of the city council and people on this committee may change. They may rotate off so it
It's up to
may
you.
be.
I'm hearing a couple of different things.
what do
But
you
this
think?
first is really background information, so it could easily be reviewed again and picked up. But that's up to
That's
you
fine,
on when
that's
you want to schedule it.
Yeah, maybe we could just put it on the packet for December, and if we get to it, we get to it, and then if we don't, then we get, just so we can always review it in our long December break, that we'll at least have the information, even if we don't get to it.
Okay, I think I'm hearing 2 to 2. for December.
I think it works to have a primer in December if we have room for it, and then take it up in substance in January.
That's why they put you all the way down there, so I couldn't coerce you into voting my way. isn't it?
Can you give a brief description of what the building code appeal is or what the topic is? If not, that's fine.
There's a university that has a chapel
Uh,
that would like to sort of make a break or a distinction between the chapel portion and the rest of the building. And that break or that wall that's being proposed, at least in the eye of the building official, is making the situation less safe, which is not allowed.
when is that appeal? Do you know offhand? I'll look it up on.
November 14th.
Matt, I think if we have a little bit of a primer in December, it'll help us to give feedback to Arnie on what additional research would be helpful in January.
I agree with you. I was just trying to intimidate you from afar, so.
Is there still likely to be a CUP for the Spotswood development in November or December?
Yes, they're trying to make the November deadline, so for the December meeting.
Oh my.
It's filling up.
Well, I think what Nick said was great. If we could put a small bit on the agenda and, there's the.
You can always move it to January if we
Yeah.
have a full
We've
meeting.
done that multiple times.
It wouldn't be
with
the
these
first time.
zoning discussions.
All right, thank you, Arnie. Is that the end of the zoning planning report?
Does conclude the
Great.
zoning report.
Do we have any unique updates for catalyst projects? Other than we definitely got the green infrastructure group one, but I'm gonna say let's just move on. And how about key annual PC milestones? Again, I think we know that we're gonna do accessory dwelling units next and small cell. I guess so. Small cells in November. Okay. All right. How about a city council report?
Sure. We met last Thursday and we had public hearings on a couple of the items that we had discussed, one being the using the first floor on Randolph Street in the C1 district as part of it, using it as residential, and that passed unanimously. In the public hearing on allowing the health center to be moved at WNL, that passed as well. And we made we approved a recommendation to purchase property next to Evergreen Cemetery, John Knox's property, which the city will plan to use at least a portion of it to expand Evergreen Cemetery. And that's all I have unless there's any questions.
If they do purchase that, do you have to get a rezoning for that when you actually?
I think it's like before Blake had asked that question, it's R1. Is that R1, I would assume, because so cemeteries are allowed in R1.
but not in parks and open space, which we'll have to fix later.
Yeah, but not Parks and
Just nonstop cemetery expansion. Wow.
Yeah,
What's going on with
it just worked out great. It was coincidental that we were able to purchase properties near both cemeteries. And
What's that
we,
say about Lexington's demographics?
yeah, right. Well, and with the new cemetery master plan, we've learned and changes in burials. I mean, some people still want to be buried, but there's a lot more people are getting cremated. So it really expands it for many years into the future. So good opportunity. I'm glad it worked out. We weren't sure we would have this opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, so moved.
Yeah.
Thank you.